like to introduce Charlotte Phillips, the founder, co-founder of Brooklyn for Peace.
My name is Charlotte. I'm the chairperson of Brooklyn for Peace. I'm very happy to welcome everyone to this forum as well as to our new home at the Commons on the second floor. Thanks to everybody who joined us upstairs earlier this evening to celebrate our new office, which we hope will allow us to amplify our efforts to build both the peace movement in Brooklyn as well as the culture and community of peace in this very difficult period. If you are new to Brooklyn for Peace, please check out our brochure, and if you're not already on our mailing list, please sign up legibly to receive announcements of upcoming events and opportunities for action. I'll mention some more of those in the break between the speech and the Q&A. So we're here tonight for this forum on the topic, the ugly head of extremism from USA to Europe to India. Our speaker is Dr. Partha Banerjee, human rights activist, immigrant rights organizer, labor educator, a longtime member of Brooklyn for Peace, and I'm proud to call him my friend. In helping us to think about this very timely topic, Partha will address the overarching question, what extremism, religious, political, social, cultural, or economic, or all of the above? And of special importance, how can we fight back? Partha Banerjee is a first-generation Bengali immigrant from India. He is a labor educator, human rights activist, writer, poet, and also a musician. He has personal experience with the fundamental militarist doctrines of the right-wing parties in India, which he has rejected, but without disavowing his deep roots in ecumenical and secular Hinduism. Partha published his Bengali memoir in 2016, and he is looking for literary agent to publish the English version, which is a different book written from his American activism point of view. He is also exploring possibilities to publish an updated version of his insider book on Hindu extremism. Partha will speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, following which he will take questions. Please help me to welcome Partha.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So great to see you all. It's really heartwarming to see so many people coming to hear my talk. I just came back from India like a week or 10 days ago. I went with my family in a very rushed way. My father was very ill, and then we went there, saw him one last time, and then he passed away. And we came back, obviously heavy-hearted and sad, and the trip made me a little exhausted mentally and physically. So, but I do not want to give up on this great opportunity to speak to you. And because when Charlotte and Eleanor, I met with them at Charlotte's place, and she has always been like a wonderful friend, not just a friend, really. How do I say this? Like really a mentor, if you will. And the entire organization, Brooklyn for Peace, has been like really a family to me and my wife. And I started working with Brooklyn for Peace almost immediately after 9/11, when I was an immigrant rights grassroots organizer working against hate crimes on immigrants. And came to know about Brooklyn for Peace and immediately got drawn to it. And it has always been like an incredible association, a very positive association for me. So I have been an avid admirer of Brooklyn for Peace and the work that it does for the peace and justice movement. And then I became an even more avid admirer of Brooklyn for Peace because of my wife and her kitchen. Because, in India, in Bengal in particular, which is a lefty hotbed of politics, if you don't know, there is a saying called no meeting without eating. And Mukti has really proven that, to its fullest sense. So, I had no choice but to become even more drawn to Brooklyn for Peace, because who can refuse the great food that she makes every time? And because there will always be a little crumb and leftover for me. And so that is that. Now, I initially thought that I would touch upon the rise of extremism in USA and Europe and India. But honestly, what do I know about Europe? And I have always been a great believer in grassroots knowledge. I have known two countries in my entire life. One is the United States and the other one is India, or vice versa, whichever comes first. I don't know. I have spent 30 years in India and 30 years in the United States. So between these two countries, I have gained some knowledge and some insight. I quit my science career to do activism, however stupid that may sound. And I went back to school, do a journalism degree, and then started working as a journalist, hated it. They asked me to work for ABC, which I realized was Disney, and that was not my thing. I quit. And then 9/11 came, unfortunately, but also for people like me, always looking for inspiration to do activism on the ground, it was a great opportunity to plunge into the world of activism, progressive activism, and then I started working out of a dingy basement office in Jackson Heights where the train actually literally rumbles over your head. And that place was like very soon became filled with journalists and media to know what we were doing to save the lives and dignity of poor immigrants. That was really a great transition in my life. And I'm saying all of this to you not to, make it like a too personal story, but really to emphasize on a point, and the point being that you can have PowerPoint presentations and you can have academic discussions, and those are extremely important. You can bring in Noam Chomsky, I've been very privileged to know him a little bit. All of those things are important, but I think sometimes in the milieu of discussion, the grassroots life stories get missing. They slip out of people's active consciousness. And that is really the way I have decided to do this discussion. Because, you are here, all of you are very highly experienced, very highly educated, very highly knowledgeable people. And I do not even want to pretend that I am going to tell you something that you already do not know. Honestly. What I'm planning to do here is that between some personal stories and between some slides that I plan to show you, I'm going to put together an overall diagram, if you will, of the rise of extremism worldwide, particularly in the United States and India, the two so-called biggest democracies in the world. Really. And then, once we understand, sort of like a comprehensive picture, and grab the gravity of the situation, then maybe we can think about some solutions aspects of it. Or is there at all something that we can do, or it is really a lost case, as it sometimes seems daunting, scary? Because it is not, it has crossed the realm of democracy, both in the United States and in India. And they still call them democracies, biggest democracies. But they are no democracy whatsoever anymore. It's a fake democracy run by corporations, run by corporate media, and their bought politicians. And they're brainwashing the ordinary people all the time. And most people, without demeaning their experience, without demeaning their knowledge, and without demeaning their goodness, most people do not simply have the time or the expertise to understand what is going on and how serious it is. So I think that our responsibility is actually even more, much greater than ever before, because the way I look at it, and I say it to my labor union students all the time, I've been teaching, very fortunately for the past 10 years, I've been teaching political and social subjects to one of the largest labor unions in New York City. And I have been able to teach literally thousands of labor union workers over these 10 years on various subjects. And I keep telling them that the people who come to my class, we have a 30,000 strong labor union, out of which I get 1,500 people. That's the total number. So I tell them that 1,500 is what, 5% of the strength of this labor union. But this 5% is extremely important because I consider you to be the leaders. So I'm not teaching you, but I'm sharing the knowledge and the insight that I have gathered in my life, both in India and here as a first generation immigrant who came to this country with no English speaking abilities at all. This is my life's experience. I'm going to share this experience with you to strike a common chord, because I know that my life's experience is very similar to yours, with some variations. Can we share our life's experiences, find solidarity with each other, understand the problems that we are faced with, and then understand who are responsible, which forces are responsible behind our pains and our sufferings and our troubles and our failures. And through that discussion, can we come up with some type of an action plan so that we can put up a strong fight. Even if we die fighting. And that's exactly what I'm planning to do here tonight. In a little different way, because obviously this is not a class. And I'm not lecturing. Really, I'm not lecturing. We've had lectures, okay? We've had lectures from the Democratic Party, we've had lectures from the Republican Party, we've had lectures from the media. We are sick and tired of their lectures. We need to do it in a different way, sharing our knowledge and our experience and our ideas. That is how we want to do it. Now, to emphasize what's going on, particularly in India and in the United States, they are so strikingly similar. And I just put up this first slide picture on the screen to emphasize that point. When the entire civilized, educated, enlightened world is against extremism, against fascism, against war, against immigrant bashing, against Islamophobia, against anti-gay, anti-lesbian propaganda, against environmental destruction, against cultural conformity, against police brutality, against anti-woman actions on the ground. These two people are embracing each other because you know what? They are probably now the two friends that they're left with. They have nobody to support them outside of their own realm, outside of their own people, and outside of their own corporations and media. They need each other, so their hug is, that's why it's so tight. And it's really laughable. It's laughable. But at the same time, it's very scary because these two people represent not just numerically a very high number of people, India being a country of 1.3 billion people today, and the USA is 330 million, but the number is not really so important. The important thing is that they have the support, active support of world's largest corporations and their money and their media. And these corporations are responsible for environmental destruction. These corporations are responsible for the war industry. These corporations are responsible for the private prison industry. These corporations are responsible for creating lies and myths and illusions through their media. These corporations are responsible for excluding some of the most substantive discussion that there could be. I call it journalism of exclusion. That means what you see in the newspaper, what you see on TV, is a journalism of inclusion, something that you can see. But then there is so much that you do not get to see that should have been news. And that is what I call journalism of exclusion. So on one hand, there is journalism of exclusion. On the other hand, there is journalism of propaganda for a particular socio-economic political system that has completely failed us. And it is happening on so many different fronts at the same time that sometimes it is very overwhelming for us. And like who wants to listen to sad and negative and grim talks all the time? Nobody. I want to go out and have some fun, okay? I really do. Believe me, honest to God. And people call me why are you so sad and negative all the time? Because I have no reason to be happy other than my family, my daughter and my wife and my personal life and my writing and my teaching. That's different. If I go beyond it and look at the world, I find no reason to be happy. I have a man who is my president. I'm ashamed of him. I'm ashamed of him. I don't even want to mention his name. That's how ashamed I am. Honest. Yeah. Then, my other country, we're now dual citizens. Okay, we have 2 passports. So my other country, I'm ashamed of him too. His passport, his US visa was revoked because he was a mastermind of anti-Muslim genocide in Gujarat. There is a new book that just came out, written by a Canadian woman journalist named Rana Ayub. The name of the book is Gujarat Files. She has done an incredibly investigative reporting and wrote this book. And it actually shows point by point by point how this man named Modi and his associates were directly responsible for the genocide of thousands of Muslims in Gujarat. His US visa was revoked. And of course now, and that was then, back in 2002, when then Bush was in power, so what do you expect? They gave him life. And then now, United States and India are they are in bed together. They need each other very much. US corporations need India, and US corporations need China. These are the 2 countries that they simply cannot, ignore anymore. So when I first came to America as a foreign student back in 1985, there would be no mention of India in mainstream media, TV or newspaper. None. Because India was not a friend of the United States at that time. India was a friend of Soviet Union. Those were the days. After the Soviet Empire fell, then they found a new partner in India, and then suddenly India would be mentioned in media. And now Pakistan is never mentioned. It has lost favor of the United States government and its corporations. And India is suddenly the poster child, as if India really has changed and it has really become an incredibly prosperous and honest and beautiful country. I mean, it is an incredibly prosperous and honest and beautiful country, but not for the corporations. For the ordinary people, that's different. India has its music, India has its poetry, India has its natural beauty, you name it, it's all there. But those things you never get to hear or read on media. You never ever get to hear about anything positive about anybody else but the United States on mainstream media. It's all USA, 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 and that is really the worst form of propaganda, and we are used to it. Nobody even questions it. That's extremism. That's extremism. Blatant exclusion of news from media. That's extremism, if you do it on purpose. When 2 of the biggest hurricanes ever in history slammed the United States, and there is no discussion of climate change on media, that's extremism. That's extremism. So there is this funny story. It's not really funny, but we just want to make it as funny as possible because we want to laugh from time to time. So on CNN or any media XYZ, they bring in 2 experts to talk about climate change. So they are both PhDs, they are both well-dressed, they are both beautiful or handsome, and then they sit them in front of the camera and then they start asking them questions. Why do you think climate change is real? So person X, expert X answered the question. Why do you think climate change is fake? It's not real. Expert Y. She answers the question. Everybody is happy. Media is balanced and fair and objective. Right? They give them equal time on the clock. 2 minutes and 37 seconds each. Fair and objective and balanced. Okay? Right? What is missing from it? Missing is the fact that person X who is saying climate change is real is supported by 97% of world scientists. And person Y who is saying climate change is unreal and fake and made up is representing 3% of world scientists, and all of them being sponsored by Exxon and coal companies. But nobody gets it because most people do not have that kind of an insight to understand that aspect of the discussion. So media seems to be fair and objective to them, and neutral. What are you talking about? Media is biased. Look at them. They brought 2 scientists. They're both given equal time. They asked them very fair and balanced questions, and then at the end of the discussion, everybody went home happily ever after. What is extremism? What the crap are you talking about? There is no extremism. So everything is being done in a very, very planful, purposeful, well-orchestrated, well-designed, and subtle way. Is this censorship? No. You can speak freely. It's not censorship. Unless you know the politics behind it. That critical thinking is missing, and when you brainwash people with baseball, cricket, Bollywood, Hollywood, if you watch Bollywood, you would think that people in India only dance and sing and do nothing else. And they only dance and sing in Hindi. That's the only language in India. They all dress up exactly the same way, as if there is no cultural diversity in India. It's going on year after year after year after year after year. So a new generation grows up without knowing what diversity is all about. They think that this is India. You dance in this very funny way, you sing in a very funny way, and you make love in a very funny way. And you kiss, but you don't kiss. It's very strange. It's really very strange. And that's India today. You talk to anybody outside of this educated audience. Have you ever seen an Indian movie? Yeah, Bollywood. They have no clue that there's an incredible history of progressive Indian movies. Very powerful wave of Indian cinema. Nobody knows. You talk to anybody in India, what do you think of black people? 95% of them would say that blacks are criminals. Blacks are thugs. Blacks are antisocial. If you ask them, how do you know? Well, I see that on TV all the time. That is how it is portrayed. Same with Muslims. It has come to a point where corporations, their interviewing committees, would look at somebody's resume, and if it's a Muslim name, he would not even be called for an interview, regardless of how educated and how intelligent that applicant is. Isn't that extremism? That's cultural extremism. That's social extremism. Then we can talk about economic extremism. We can talk about environmental extremism. We can talk about media's extremism. We can talk about political extremism where there are two parties. There is democracy. If you do not like the Republicans, then you can always vote for the Democrats. Even though Dianne Feinstein and Chuck Schumer are cajoling up with Trump, with help from New York Times. So I went to this famous journalism school. They call them number one, self-styled number one. That's a different story. I don't even know how they do it or why they do it, but they do it. So I went there for my journalism degree. So at that time, I actually had the very strange desperation to bring Noam Chomsky to speak to us. So he came. That was really my first association with that man. So he immediately talked about New York Times and Judith Miller, if you remember that name, who was the fabricator of the WMD stories. And with that one story repeated week after week after week, they actually legitimized one of the most brutal genocides in history. No extremism. What happened to Judith Miller? What happened to New York Times? Nothing. Judith Miller got a slap on her wrist, got transferred, and started working for Fox. Yeah, go check it out. And New York Times is as powerful as ever before. Nothing happens to them. I talk to elite liberals in Park Slope, and they all read New York Times with their hands folded, as if they're like really worshiping God. If I tell somebody, well, you know, like Fox is bad, you know, it's owned by Rupert Murdoch, okay, and New York Post is bad, it's owned by the same person, and, you know, like Rush Limbaugh is bad, I mean, he's like a fascist. We all know that. But that's only half of the story. The other half is New York Times and CNN and Washington Post that nobody talks about. Think about it. I'm posing some questions for you. So, my father died, and then he was a quote-unquote right wing. He was actually one of the biggest supporters of Modi, believe it or not. And I was a member of their social organization. It's almost like, I don't want to compare it, but it's like really almost like KKK. And I was with them for 15 years of my life. Okay, don't hate me yet. I was with them because of my father. Then I came out of it and started talking against it. I wrote a book against it and then tried to expose them as much as I could. The point is that I'm shifting here to, like a different part of the discussion, that is the coalition discussion. But before I do that, I would like to have your permission to show you some slides, because I think I have spoken for a long time, and it's time to show you some slides real quick, because not because I believe in slides showing too much, but some of them might be a little important to highlight, to underline some of the things that I was talking about, okay? So, this is like really a very vast and extensive discussion. And Charlotte has very kindly given me 30 to 40 minutes to speak, but like this is, if you will, really should be considered as the start of a very big discussion. And I hope that at some point we can continue this discussion. in like a series of discussions. Okay, 1, 2, extremism, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can all participate in that discussion. Okay, because, and honestly, those of us, and all of us here, we call ourselves progressive and pro 99%. We need to have our own media. We need to have our own entertainment. We need to have our own literature. Having our own literature is extremely important, done in a very easy to understand, ear to the ground way. Without ever undermining the importance of academic literature. That's extremely important, but for people, in 1984, George Orwell classified a group of people, he called them proles. Probably it came from proletariats, I don't know. But for the proles out there, without undermining their knowledge, without undermining their life's experience, we need to have a language that they can understand. It's extremely critically important, whether you talk about Islamophobia, whether you talk about anti-immigrant bashing, whether you talk about DACA, immigrant children being forced out, deported for no crimes that they have committed. They grew up in this country. 800,000 of them. When you talk about union bashing, labor union bashing, when you talk about corporate greed, how the 1%, not even 1%, 0.1% of the American people now have amassed 90% of the country's wealth. Think about it. 0.1% of the American people now have wealth that equals to the other 90% of the people of this country. That's not extremism. What are you talking about? For all of these things, I think we need to create our own literature. We need to create our own media. We need to create our own entertaining, fun way to reach people. And we definitely need to find some type of a cross-cultural solidarity across the pro 99% spectrum. And so I'm going to show you just a few slides, and then maybe we can have some time for Q&A. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let me just show you some slides real quick. Okay, just to highlight some of my points. Here is one. So this is a slide that I show to my labor union students all the time, religiously, practically every single year. What it has done is that there are two social scientists named Wilkinson and Pickett from England. They have written a book called The Spirit Level. It came out back in 2010. And it has done only one thing. It has compared income inequality in developed capitalist countries. Developed capitalist countries, okay, France, Germany, USA, Canada, Japan, Sweden, Switzerland, and so on. All right, and it has compared income inequality directly against social and health problems, one problem at a time. Some of these social and health problems are life expectancy, math and literacy, infant mortality, homicide, imprisonment, and so on and so forth, obesity, and so on. So they have compared income inequality of those countries against social and health problems of those countries, one problem at a time. And then they have put all the social and health problems together, lumped them together, and compared them against this one factor, which is income inequality. And this is what they have found. The countries that are at the lower end of the graph, they are Sweden, Japan, Norway, Finland, Belgium, those. That's the first tier of countries. That means they have a lowest possible income inequality, even though they are all capitalist countries. So there cannot be complete income equality. That is impossible in a capitalist country. It's all right. And then we have a middle tier of countries such as Greece, Ireland, France, and Canada, and Australia, Italy. That's the middle tier of countries where they have a middle amount of income inequality and consequently a middle amount of social and health problems. And on top, way on top, is the United States. That means we have the highest amount of income inequality among the rich capitalist countries, and consequently, a direct consequence is that we have the highest amount of social and health problems because of the income inequality. Well, people get confused. Some of them get angry. What are you talking about? We are the best. We are the best, we are the best, we are the best. Isn't that what we hear 24/7 on media? So if we show this graph to some people the first time, if they're not this highly educated and intelligent Brooklyn for Peace audience, they would be really upset and angry, and some of them might actually beat me up. Honest. Seriously. But this is the fact. This is the fact. Okay? Now, I went to India and had a chance to talk to TV there, and I had a Bengali interview. And then I talked about how in America, McDonald's and KFC and Burger King and Popeyes and those places are like really, they have some of the worst food possible and toxic. And they can be found concentrated in the impoverished communities only. You go to Crown Heights, you go to East Flatbush, you go to South Bronx, you find clusters of fast food places. But in India, going to McDonald's is hip. You go to McDonald's for dinner, you must be rich. That is how people think about American food, without ever trying to understand how bad they are. They don't know anything about the food movement. When I talk about Parksville Food Co-op, they're like, what are you talking about? Food movement? So what do? You eat food and move? That is how people's minds are completely propagandized. Anything from America must be great, including McDonald's and KFC. No questions asked. Anything from Hollywood must be great, no matter how violent and obnoxious it is. Blacks are all criminals. Immigrants are all illegal and therefore must be kicked out. Very strange. And in India, there is exactly a very strikingly similar political landscape right now. Anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-poor, and on top of that, add anti-woman crimes. Extremely dangerous situation for women in India. You wouldn't even believe it. It's not just violence on the street, it's violence at home. Nobody even considers that violence. It is taken for granted. If you are a man and if you are the head of the family, then you have a right to slap your wife from time to time. It's okay. You can take all her money. That's okay. You can deprive her of pursuing her career, even though she is a very highly educated person, a musician or a lawyer. After marriage, it can't work. It's okay. Marital rape is okay. I'm not even talking about bride burning and dowry deaths. I'm not even talking about that. I'm not talking about female infanticide that happens all across the country every single day. I'm not even talking about that. You talk about one most grotesque human rights violation in the world today, that's anti-woman violence in India. I get very emotional talking about it, and I talk to people all the time. I can tell you stories, and I think that one of the things I want to emphasize is that every single slide, every single graph, every single statistic must be accompanied with a human story. And that human story is missing from our discussion. So let me just show you some slides real quick. Long discussion, and one night, one evening cannot really do justice to it. Here is Hindu fanatics that are in power in India right now. Guess what? I was with them for a very long time. This is what they did. It's a fact. It's not a fabrication. It's fact. Their men killed Mahatma Gandhi. I'm not a big fan of Mahatma Gandhi, but that's a different story. But they killed Mahatma Gandhi. It's a fact. All right? Here is, don't just blame the Hindu fanatics. This is happening next door. Right next door. Islamic extremism. What they did, on top of the fact that they have really subjugated women a big way, in a very secular and very liberal, you wouldn't even believe it how liberal that country is. They killed their founder, nation's founder, Mujibur Rahman, back in 1975, and almost his entire family was wiped out. All supported by Kissinger and CIA. It's a fact. Kissinger was directly responsible for the massacre and genocide in Bangladesh in 1971 when they had their 9-month-long liberation struggle. Some 10 million people were killed in 9 months, and by some accounts, 300,000 women were raped. Journalism of exclusion, not too many people know about it. Okay? These people were responsible for it. If you please turn off your cell phone, much appreciated. Economic terror. I claim this land in the name of His Majesty. That was the call, the slogan back in those days. Right hand side, I structurally adjust this land in the name of economic growth. Neoliberal terror. Exactly the same thing. Looting, plundering, ravaging, squandering, killing, maiming, torturing, raping, deforestation, you name it. Same thing is going on in the name of capitalism, development, and prosperity. IMF and World Bank and Wall Street are behind it. What is the result of that? Here is the result. Actual distribution of wealth in the United States. I'm just talking about the United States. So 1% has so much wealth that you cannot even show it on the graph. You need 10 different stacks of graphs. You put them one on top of the other. That is the extent of their wealth. This is not extremism. I'm not saying that everybody should make exactly the same amount of money. But where is the sanity? Where is the control? Where is the regulation? I don't know how many slides I can show you. They are all okay. Maybe here. What's happening in other parts of the world? 24th of April 2014 in Dhaka, Bangladesh. This building that housed Disney, Walmart, Gap, Mango. I don't even know the names, maybe my daughter can tell you. The entire building collapsed, instantly killing 1,200 workers. Corporate greed. Apple iPhone suicides in China. People are so overworked, so tired, so frustrated, so desperate, so impoverished, so hopeless, they jump to their death. Now they have put big wires so that they cannot kill themselves. iPhone manufacturers. We all have an iPhone. Okay? Not extremism. All right. Maybe just a couple of more. Sorry, this is true. This is real. This is happening today. Monsanto suicides in India. Every 30 minutes, I heard this on Democracy Now! From Amy. Every 30 minutes, a farmer is killing himself in India because of desperation created by Monsanto. Agricultural terror, economic terror, cultural terror. People are killing themselves. In 10, 15 years, some 100,000, 200,000 people, maybe more, I don't even know, people, farmers in India only, cotton farmers, committed suicide in India. It's not even news anymore. It's not even news anymore. Nobody even talks about it anymore.
So how's Monsanto contributed to that?
Monsanto, yeah. So what happens is that Monsanto promises, first of all, they confiscate their seeds. Then they float their own seeds with help from government and their media. And they promise much better yield for their produce. But they do not tell them that in order to make it successful, you need irrigation, you need other infrastructure that they do not have. So their farm fails and they cannot pay back their loans. They take even bigger loans from loan sharks. They cannot pay it back year after year after year. And they cannot use their own saved seeds anymore by law. They must use Monsanto seeds. And they cannot pay back their loans. They get into bigger and deeper loans and they kill themselves because of desperation. And believe it or not, many of these farmers actually kill themselves by drinking Roundup, which is Monsanto. Not making it up. Check it out. Check it out. Okay? Every time you doubt me, it's okay. You just check it out. Okay? All right. Social extremism. Here in the good old United States. This is 2000 to 2014 incomplete federal data on police killings. Police killed black Americans at nearly the same rate as Jim Crow lynchings. And this is a map. Okay? All right. Next one. Similar. Social extremism in India. This is a rape map. Only from the year 2011, and this is only the number of reported rape cases and percentage of convictions in 1 year alone. And in India, it's like at least 10 times more because nobody reports it. Reporting it to the police will actually lodge you into a bigger trouble. If you're not rich, you cannot find a good lawyer. Your life will be miserable. So nobody even reports it. And this is only the reported cases from 1 year alone. Okay? You heard about the infamous rape case in Delhi where a young woman was gang raped on the bus and killed later. This is a quote, a famous quote unquote quote from the lawyer for the rapists. Quote number 1, in our society, we never allow our girls to come out from the house. Quote number 2, we have the best culture. In our culture, there is no place for a woman.
Wow.
Wow, yeah, that is the word. So, thugs and killers, they get encouraged by it. And as of September 5, 2 days ago, one of the leading voices of dissent, a woman journalist, was killed in front of her house. Chances are the perpetrators, the criminals, will never be caught because they are all supported by these big powers. They're hiring them. And it is not the first time. All the leading voices of dissent are being eliminated one person at a time. That is today's India. That is social extremism. That's going on. What we see here, when we talk about police brutality against blacks, we see a violence on women in India. It's strikingly similar. Here, what the cops do, there the mafia does it. This is going on around the clock. Beef murders. You heard about it. Eat beef, you get killed. Okay? Now, one last thing, and I think this is kind of important because if we do not talk about it, I am going to skip over the military extremism aspect of it because this is Brooklyn for Peace and he can actually lecture me pretty much on that subject. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about one last thing and probably will quickly touch upon the what to do about it aspect of it. Cultural extremism. Left-hand side, one of my most favorite books that I've ever read in my life is 1984. Which is happening today as we speak. War is peace. Bombing, nuking North Korea would be okay because that will bring peace. Okay? And then from my great friend and mentor, Noam Chomsky, the general population doesn't even know what's going on and it doesn't even know that it doesn't even know. Now that is not really an elitist statement, okay? It might seem to be an elitist statement, but it is not. They know what's going on. What he means, I think, is that they do not know how it is happening, or who are the people behind it. That's what he needs. People know. People know that they cannot buy a house. They cannot pay back their mortgage. They cannot take their loved ones to a good hospital because they don't have health insurance. They know that they cannot send their kid to a good school because they simply do not have money for higher education, even though the kid is extremely bright. They know that. It's not that they do not know. They simply do not know why that is the case. And they are drawn and they are brainwashed to vote every 4 years, every 2 years, and they vote for the same system cycle after cycle after cycle. And that status quo is one of the greatest forms of extremism, in my opinion. So that's really creating this illusion in case of India that even though you are poor today, you will be rich tomorrow. And then this grandiose idea of illusion is really inflicted, actually shoved down the throat of the young generation. And so the only aspiration in life is to be rich. It doesn't matter how. You must be rich because that is the ultimate goal of life. And this creates this illusion through Hollywood and Bollywood. It perpetuates the illusion. People fall for it. And then that cycle goes on. Nobody becomes rich if they're born poor in the United States. Nobody becomes rich in India if they're born poor. But the propaganda goes on and people fall for it. So that's about it. And I had a lot of other slides, but I do not want to waste your time doing that. I think that I will save the what to do part of the discussion when we have questions and answers. And honestly, I cannot answer all the questions. I think that when we have the Q&A session, I would rather have it like an open forum so that if somebody had a question, then somebody else could try to answer it, not just me. I think that would be really, like a very transparent. I might, chime in from time to time, but I would rather have you to, address some of those issues. But thank you very much for your time.
This microphone is for streaming. So if you speak into it and you don't really hear yourself as well, it's because it's going through the live stream. So, because if we kept it connected to this, there would be a lot of feedback, which was the original issue. So we'll be passing this around for you to ask your questions. Speak into it clearly, okay? But don't say, oh, I can't hear myself. So would you like to determine who speaks and I pass to?
Yeah, anybody. Whoever is willing to speak. And again, this is not just like a typical Q&A. This is sort of like...
Wait, Charlotte wants to speak.
Before we get to the Q&A, though, let me mention that this event is free. We never ask for any donations at the door, but we do need money to support events like this. They don't come free of charge to us. So if you can donate on your way out, we'll pass this can around. We would greatly appreciate it. And also let me mention that in view of the question, what can we do to fight back? We do have two concrete opportunities coming up next Sunday, September 17th, and Sunday, September 24th. We'll be reaching out to our Brooklyn neighbors through two street festivals, the Flatbush Frolic and the Atlantic Antic. And we have a flyer we'll be passing out and a sign-up sheet. So if you can sign up for a 2-hour time slot to come and help us reach the public, that would really be great. And also it's one concrete thing we all do to start fighting back. So thanks, Partha, very much for the presentation.
Right, and Matt has the sign-up sheet.
And Matt has the sign-up sheet, and the flyers on the table over there also. Tara?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about these upcoming street fairs, that we've got some really great and we think fun activities planned for the booth. We have poll, which we have been doing for the past few years, which everybody loves doing and doing with their kids even sometimes, in which people are asked to vote for how they would spend their tax dollars on the needs of the country, and then we show them what choices they made and how the federal government is actually spending their money, so we'll be doing that, and that always draws a lot of people into the booth. But we'll also be doing, we're going to try out something new called the photo booth, in which people will be invited to send a message to their senators and their representatives, and we will take a photograph. So we will offer them various messages like healthcare, not warfare, maybe 10 or 12 different messages, or they can write their own. And we will take a photograph of them holding up their message, and we will send that photograph, all those photographs then, to Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, and the Brooklyn representatives. And again, we think that this is something that will resonate with people, but as you might imagine, we're going to need a lot of help in the booths to get this going. So please, it's not just handing out flyers. We need a lot of help, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to interact with people and to other fair goers. So please, a couple of hours on either the 17th or the 24th, and you'll have a good time. And then you can go to the fair yourself.
Thank you. That was a wonderful lecture on extremism. I was able to see extremism in a way that I never thought of. What we have in both India and the U.S. is really ethno-nationalism. That's one thing, and here it's a minority. I mean, depends on the 30% or so of his core supporters. The scary part of India is that's the majority Hindu nationalist element that's in power, and may have a staying, staying power. It may last longer. Is there any counter forces, Hindu and others, coming together to resist in India? And the second part of it is the love affair that you see between Modi and Trump. Probably will not last long, since both of them are economic nationalists. America first versus India first, and that economic interest might come on a collision course or something. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to answer the second question first. I think that even though Trump, in my opinion, is quite vulnerable today, and his own, party is kind of conflicted on him. But see, the problem is that, again, this is not really the Republican Party that is doing it. And I mentioned before that when Trump is actually getting into more and more trouble, it's really people like Feinstein and Schumer and this type of an established Democratic Party that are actually trying to sort of coming to his rescue in a way. Now they are talking about bipartisan deal making and things like that. Suddenly, they are finding something good in Trump. Okay, and this is it's not that unusual, because that really has been the history of these two parties all along. Okay, if you go back just a few years when the WMD story was actually causing havoc, and when it was actually giving a free hand to Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld to start a genocide in Iraq, It was 99 senators out of 100 that actually supported that war resolution. Only Bernie Sanders voted against it. So it is nothing unusual, nothing new. They do not work for the 99%. They work for the 1%. So even though, even like, the worst case scenario, if Trump is gone, it is not really going to make a big difference because the person, the man in line is like, like a known white supremacist. Okay, and he's going to be like, I don't even know that you can compare, like who is better and who is worse. Like even today, George Bush seems to be a better person than Trump. Think about it. By that standard. So that's not going to change. And in the case of India, there is a very strong opposition against the Hindu nationalists. The problem is that they're very splintered. They do not have money because all these corporations are paying big time to BJP and Modi's government and their party. And the problem again is that the party that could be a substitute to BJP, the ruling party, is Congress party, which is extremely corrupt. It's just like, the Indian version of the Democratic Party. People have lost trust in them. Okay, so unless you really come up with a third force by grassroots movement, you have no hope. It's the same here in the United States, and politics is so much bought by big money and media. Exactly the same thing is happening in India, even more and more and more. So even though India is a multi-party system, it's really largely has become a two-party system. On one side is the fascists, and the other side is the corrupt and crook. Really. Yes, please, anybody.
Gotta pick someone.
I'm passing it back here, man. Pass it like a joint.
I wouldn't know about that.
None of you in the 60s.
I didn't inhale.
To talk right into it. This is streaming.
Can't hear you.
One of the themes in your talk that occurred to me is the role. Streaming. Okay, all right. Some years ago, 10, 20 years ago, I was puzzled by all the kids who were majoring in marketing and communications. And now I kind of think I understand it. They're selling stuff to us. So they're, and you can see it when you hear things on TV. Dream, passion, robust. These tested words that they use, we're really being manipulated by tested propaganda manipulation stuff. And I have to thank my high school English teachers for making me aware of the subtleties of language sometimes, but it's all around. We are really, really brainwashed and intelligent in a very skilled sort of way. And I like your idea of having our own culture and encouraging younger people who are creative to tell stories and do music.
Yeah, that's like, I'm so thankful that you asked that question because that is really a very, very important question. Cultural terrorism, cultural extremism, and it has come to a point. I would invite some of my young friends here to perhaps address that because they probably know it much better than I do. But I'm actually showing you one slide, if I may, to highlight that point, what is happening in terms of young people's minds completely being influenced by this wealth-only lifestyle. to a point that millions of young people, they actually, I have talked to quite a few of them personally. They tell me that they do not read books and they do not even want to read books. Okay? And I found this quote, which I thought was so timely and relevant. And this is something that I want to show you. You don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them. And that's exactly what's happening in India, and in a large extent, to a large extent here in America. Again, I may be wrong, and I know that there are many young people, activists and non-activists, young people who are thinking differently, who have a different kind of a lifestyle. But I don't want to speak for them. I would invite, if they can help me out, to address this particular question. Maybe someone in the back, she can do it. Maybe you can mention your name also.
And this is being streamed, so we're talking to a bit loud.
Hi, my name is Sasha. So I just want to say I 100% hear what Dr. Banerjee has said. And I also want to acknowledge that young people are also at the forefront of every powerful movement that's changing the political landscape right now, from the young people who are sitting in front of government offices to protest the repeal of DACA, to the Black Lives Matter movement, to workers' rights movements. Like, it's us that are at the forefront of all of those things. And so I think it's a both and conversation, not an or not a what, an if conversation. So I think acknowledging the important work of how those movements, immigrants' rights, Black Lives Matter, have shaped our current political landscape feels very inspiring to me as a person who identifies still as a young person, although I'm almost 30, and has been very informed by, still very young, but also that's been the most radicalizing thing for me, is other young people who are of my generation and are leading, for me, the most radical and exciting and dynamic movements of our time, for me as young people. And so, and having worked with a lot of young people, I know those are the movements that are lifting us up and giving us promise and hope, and really standing out in front, and also building on the legacy of the movements that many folks in the room have built for us. And so I think we stand on the shoulders of that, and don't forget that, and at the same time, we have a lot of work to do.
Tom, I think you were. And then
Thank you very much, Partha, for a great talk, sharing your ideas with us. I'm especially interested in the way you defined extremism. I thought that was very helpful. Going back to India for a moment, I just saw a piece of news that interested me greatly. Kerala state recently, a coalition led by the Communist Party in Kerala, which has for many years often been in power there, always elected, is back in power there. And I wonder whether you can talk a little bit about that. I hear that the social conditions there are generally better than much of India.
Generally what?
Better. And I'm just curious whether you think that the role of their ideas and the kind of vision they express and how they relate to the people of that state may offer us any hopes for the future.
Yeah, that's another like great observation, and it is true. The Kerala is a very small state in South India, but for various reasons, or historical reasons, Kerala has one of the highest literacy rates in India. It has 90% literacy, okay? And consequently, like people are politically much more enlightened than many other parts of India. But the communist movement is a very strange phenomenon in India, and I do not want to go through the entire history because we simply don't have time. But Bengal, West Bengal, where I come from, Calcutta, used to be left. Actually, it was ruled by communists for a very long time. And it has a lot of history with the partition of India and the migration of refugees and working with them. So it has a long history. Cultural movement, okay. It has a long history of secular movement in India. But in Kerala, what they have done, and in a very small northeastern state of Tripura, right next to Bangladesh, what they have done is that they have shifted their structure of a Stalinist, strict form of communism to almost like social democracy. Okay, so they call themselves a communist party, but they are basically social democrats, and that has really worked very well for them. Okay, because they do not talk about Stalinism and things like that, the way the Bengal communists did for a very long time and miserably failed. So, and on top of that, the fact that they have a very high literacy rate and has like the mildest form of patriarchy in India. The combination of these two really has done very well for the progressive movement in Kerala, and that is one of the reasons that the progressive forces are coming back to power cycle after cycle, even though they have their share of corruption and violence.
Thank you, Partha, for sharing your insight into this dark time we're living through. And also my condolences for the loss of your father.
Thank you.
I would like to hear a little bit more about how you broke out of the right-wing extremist group that you were a part of for so long. And also, if you could just say a few words about your criticism of Gandhi, because that really surprised me. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Again, I would probably would want to take the last part first, because that is like really a much longer discussion, and I can actually summarize it very quickly without going through the history of it. Basically, Gandhi's policy broke India, partitioned India. He actually okayed the partition, causing massive bloodshed. And Bengal and Punjab, these are the two places where there was an incredible history of progressive anti-imperialistic movements. The anti-British liberation struggles actually started there about 100 years before Gandhi came to the scene. And basically after Gandhi's arrival, the entire history of that, like anti-British, anti-imperialist struggle was completely wiped out. So that is one of the reasons. Even though I do not even ever want to demean the contribution of Gandhi to India's, freedom struggle. But that happened much, much later. Again, history is excluded. Nobody knows the history. And if you can iconize one person, Gandhi brought freedom to India. And that's it. End of discussion. That is a huge problem. Okay? So that is MLK, Dr. King, was the only person responsible for the civil rights struggle in America. If I can use one French word, that's bullshit. Okay? So that is, again, not undermining Gandhi, not undermining Dr. King. I have a lot of respect for Dr. King in particular, but this is a partial history, and I have a problem with that. What was the first part of the question?
About how you broke out of the right-wing extremists.
Okay,
Why was your father in it?
Huh?
Why was your father in it?
My father was a lifelong hardcore activist of RSS, that is like the social mother organization, parent organization of BJP, that is in political power in India right now. It's like a Hindu supremacist organization, and I was with them because of my father. I was young. I was like, he took me there when I was 6 years old. Give me a break. What do I know at 6 years? Okay, I was 6 years old and I was brainwashed. Okay, I was like, not my father. My father was not really, that kind of a violent anti, I mean, he had his conservatism. Okay, no question about it. He was deeply pro-Hindu, anti-Muslim man. Okay, but that's like everywhere in India. I mean, that's not like, an aberration at all. But when he came to know about some of our Muslim friends, when he came to America, he mellowed. He was not really like holding the same, rigorous anti-Muslim opinions anymore, because he came to contact with them, he saw them, and he changed his mind. So, but when I grew up, when I was like 20, 21 years old, I was living in Bengal. It is like the place for poetry, place for leftist politics, place for literature, place of Tagore and Satyajit Ray and Amartya Sen, okay, 2 Nobel laureates and 1 Oscar winner, okay, and they're all like progressive people, very secular, liberal people. And that is really the culture that in Calcutta we had all along. All my friends are either leftists or very secular and very liberal. How can you be with this, like KKK of India? I had to come out. I had no choice. I knew when I grew up, I knew that I did not belong there. I broke out and started writing about them. And my first book, In the Belly of the Beast, actually talks about my long association with RSS and BJP, and I plan to write more about it. In fact, I'm actually looking for ways to publish here in America to tell my story.
Okay, and then James.
I'm Arnold, and
Can you please speak up?
I'm Arnold, and when we're young, we are likely to make mistakes. Only as I was observing the commonality between India and the United States, they're both very large countries. How is the vote count managed in India with millions of people? Are there electronic machines counting the votes?
Now it is largely electronic. Largely, I would say 95% electronic.
Because they are very subject to manipulation.
Oh yeah.
And that could be one of the reasons underlying this commonality of extremism in both places being triumphant.
Yeah.
In reality, I think they don't have that many people behind them. Only if you count the vote, you can determine the result.
Very true, very true. It's really, in my opinion, it's really a very small percentage of people, political people, that is actually controlling the whole show. And they have created a psyche of fear across the country. Nobody speaks up. And that is like as close as you get to fascism. People do not speak up. People are so afraid of violence, of retribution. They could be killed, their land could be grabbed, they could be jailed. If you are a woman, you could be killed or raped on the street, no questions asked. If you are a low caste, then you could be wiped out any day, any time. And it has happened. Unless you are a very important personality and you have some political power behind you, chances are that you will be killed. So people are extremely afraid. going back to the election questions, in most places elections are rigged. Okay? Most places elections are rigged. How rigged? People do not even know their votes are secret. So their village elder rounds them up and herds them to a polling station and asks them, instructs them to vote for this party or else. They do not even know that nobody can, really know who they're voting for. And they actually come out and tell them that I voted for this candidate. And then the village elder is very pleased. End of the story. Their candidate wins. This is the election scenario, and they call it democracy and freedom.
Okay, this gentleman and then you two, because he has been holding his.
Hello. I want to know what you think. Recently I heard about all the problems in India with the weather. Climatic change is very, very bad. And you talk about the extremism there, especially between the different Hindu groups and the Muslim groups, religious violence and violence. What do you think about the weather influencing the economic conditions that will give rise to even more blatant extremism over there?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That is so true.
Yeah.
With extreme weather, changes, it's becoming even more and more and more difficult for the poor people to survive.
Right.
Okay, if you go to the village, the large swaths of land is now becoming, non-plowable because of extreme weather. Okay, so where do these people go? They flee to the city and go into an even more desperate, impoverished situation. That creates more tension. People are escaping, fleeing from, say, Bangladesh, because there is so much climate change, drastic climate change. Climate scientists are predicting that Bangladesh is actually going to go under in 50 years. That's how serious it is. That's how serious it is. And if Bangladesh goes under, the city that we come from, Calcutta, climate change is not going to follow the border. It is going to devastate Calcutta also, and millions of people. It's actually one of the most populated areas in the entire world.
Almost like a domino effect around the world.
Totally. And it will create more violence. In fact, when I did my workshop with my labor union last year, we talked about climate change. And people are already talking, US generals are already talking about climate wars. Climate wars, that is the term that they're using. The climate wars are going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years in various parts of the world. So your comment is like so relevant and so poignant.
I'll try to make this quick. What is the condition now of the Muslim minority in India in their everyday lives? Can they function, make a decent living, go to school and be treated as a minority, but decently as human beings?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and this is the reason it is so interesting. India has a very stratified system, social system. Okay, it's not like all Muslims, you can put them in one box. Okay, it's like extremely rich Muslims. In fact, in Bollywood, 3 of the biggest stars are now Muslim. Shah Rukh Khan, Salman Khan, and Amir Khan. These are the hot film stars, all Muslims. They are doing fine. Okay, Shah Rukh Khan had one visa problem. here in the United States once, like 10 years ago, and it was like front page news all over the country. Okay? So, and he has so much money, I think he actually, Forbes did a report that Shah Rukh Khan is actually richer than Tom Cruise.
Wow.
Yeah. Indian Bollywood stars and cricket players are some of the richest people on earth. So that's the uppermost stratum of Muslims, okay? Middle class Muslims, they're doing okay, you know, if they just go about, you know, like living their own lives, they will be all right. You know, they send their children to school, they work in offices, you know. I mean, the problem is really with a very large number of poor Muslims. They are in a desperate situation. They are discriminated against all the time. Governments, this Congress government, and now this anti-Muslim government, they really haven't done anything to uplift their economic condition. And when you keep people in perpetual poverty, what do? They do violence. So that's happening in India. They are in a serious situation, and they have terrorist elements because of the desperate situation, because of extreme poverty and illiteracy. And on top of that, you have these mullahs, we call them, the radical Islamists. They are brainwashing them all the time. I have no soft corner for Islamic extremism. I'm sorry. I have no sympathy for them. They are really dangerous elements.
So, this is Brooklyn for Peace, and one thing that hasn't been mentioned very much this evening is the role of the military in India, but in the United States, especially in the United States as well. The amount of money that the government spends on the military compared to what it spends on human needs. In the political plane, I think young people spoke before about some very pressing issues, but I couldn't help but notice that military spending, military posturing in the United States and the world, nuclear weapons was not mentioned at all, and that's something that I see all the time. So I'm trying to raise that issue because I think that it underlies a lot of the other social problems. India, as you know, is also a nuclear power. I'm curious as to how the average Indian looks at that, if they see that as, if they're proud of it, they feel that it means that India is a big player on the world stage, if they think that it's dangerous, if they think it's a waste of money, or if it's something that they don't think about at all.
The reason I did not include the discussion on military extremism is something that I very briefly mentioned, is that this is Brooklyn for Peace, and everybody has a knowledge that surpasses mine on that subject. So that is one of the reasons. But, you know, and I mentioned that. But then this is, you know, like this is such an important subject. Here is one of the stories. It's like, you know, like U.S. world domination tour, starting from 1945, right after Second World War. The United States started invading and bombing countries all over the world, and this is a list. Practically every single year, the United States military industry has gone into some country and bombed it.
Where can I get that?
All like easily available. I mean, I stole them from the internet, and I did not include the sources because, you know, like the sources are very easy to find. You just, if you really want to look it up, you just Google, you know, U.S. bombing since World War II, and you can find 5,000 hits. Okay, some of them are, you know, like maybe a little too fictitious, but some of them are real. I mean, some of them are mainstream. I try to get mainstream sources as much as possible, because otherwise my labor union students would call me a communist immediately, and I'm not a communist, okay? So that is one. Now, military intervention goes hand in hand with private prison complex. United States has one of the largest in history private prison industries in the whole world. Okay, and it is so scary. I didn't have time to include that slide, but it is unbelievable. And in fact, there are two corporations, Corrections Corporations of America and GEO, are the two private prison industries that actually have built so many prison complexes all over the country. In fact, some of the cities and towns have no other economy but a war economy. I mean, a prison economy. And they talk about, they use these prisoners for making clothes for US Army.
Places fighting fires?
Everything. But they also, one of the main, the prisoners are also one of the main labor bases for producing garments and uniforms for US Army. And here is how they live. This is a CCA. This is a Corrections Corporations of America, one of their complexes. And their numbers, since Reagan first privatized prison industries back in 1980, the numbers shot up, like went tenfold or something like that. By some estimates, Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition put out an estimate that some 10 million blacks and minorities are in US prisons all over the country. And he says that there are more black people in US jails than they are in college.
Yeah.
Think about it. Nobody, it's not news. As if that is, and people think that, well, you know, these people are, every time I talk about it, people say, well, you know, they are criminals, they should be in jail. What type of crime? How long should they serve? Did they have a fair trial? Did they have a lawyer? Did they have any rehabilitation program? Did they have any way to get out of that cycle of crime? This is a free country. This is a fair country. 10 million blacks are in jail. I think that's like really, you know, like an example of the extremism that we have in this country. And nobody even talks about it. I think that really bothers me is not that this is the fact or these are the facts. It's like how casual people are about it. You know, that is I think that is the scariest part of it all, that people are used to it and they do not question it, they do not challenge it, they do not consider this to be abnormal. That is really the cultural extremism that I'm talking about.
Okay, I think we have time for like one or two more questions if they're quick.
Hi, thank you. And I just wanted to follow up on your talking about corporations and multinational corporations and their role in this extremism, because I believe that it is the thing that we have in common, the United States, India, the whole world. It's really that corporations are taking over the sovereignty of the state. We as people are losing our sovereignty because of their involvement in our political system and our inability to fight and better work against their power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is absolutely true. Corporations have completely taken over. They have not no time in history corporations have invaded the political life and social life and cultural life so much to this extent ever in history. And I don't know, like, sometimes I feel very depressed and pessimistic, but then I hear my daughters about this issue, and I feel a little encouraged and inspired that, well, maybe I won't be able to see the fruits of their labor and their movement in my life, but that is going to happen one day, and that is the hope that I live with and live for. And I just want to show you one slide, not because it's a slide, but it's because something very I strongly believe in. And this is a man that I have so much admiration for, respect for. So what is that? It always seems impossible until it is done. Quote from somebody that I consider a sage in our lifetime. So he lived that life. He showed us that it is possible. It is possible to end an extremely brutal US and West sponsored apartheid that treated human beings like enemies. Here in the United States we have slavery, and in many parts of the world we still have slavery, economic slavery, extreme form of economic slavery. But something that we saw here in the United States when we had slavery, and something that we had seen in South Africa when they had apartheid, is I don't think that people understand, the new generation really understands the gravity of it. So this man, when this man says something, I take it seriously and I want to believe in it, because he has lived that life. He has showed us that it is possible to change.
Thank you for your talk. I was thinking, what is the concept of the Green? What is your concept of the Greenpeace Party? Jill Stein, who stood for presidency the last time. What is your concept of it?
I was a strong Bernie Sanders supporter.
So was I.
Yes.
But I felt very disappointed, let down.
I think that, well, let down or not, I think that there has to be a grassroots coalition of third forces. I simply refuse to believe in this two-party system. I'm still a registered Democrat, but I'm only a registered Democrat because I really want to take my first opportunity to break the Democratic Party and go for a third force.
So you do not go for the Greenpeace Party?
Well, like I said, it has to be a coalition of progressive forces.
She
offered
Bernie Sanders the presidency. He did not accept.
That I don't
Isn't
know.
it?
I'm not,
That's
I'm
what
not into that kind of political. I'm only a first generation immigrant. I have no power.
So am I.
Yeah.
And also, I am just wondering, why don't we, instead of speaking about the problems, why do we not seek solutions? Get a party, strengthen the party. Greenpeace Party is there. Bernie Sanders is there. Okay? Why don't we all, the Brooklyn for Peace, back up another party, get that party come into power? And also, besides this, USA politics, what do you think of Assam in India, the northeast region? How is it going? Assam is very communist, isn't it? What is going on over there? I'm not very thorough.
Assam, it's actually refugees, Muslim refugees from Myanmar, from Burma, that are fleeing, that are actually being driven out by the military in Myanmar, and very strangely, secretly supported by Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yeah.
It's very strange. And Buddhist monks are killing people. It's like the bizarrest thing that can happen. Okay, so that's a different discussion, but the problem is that you know, like here in America and also in India, the two countries I know well, I believe that there has to be a coalition of third forces. If you go for the Democrats and Republicans, the establishment Democrats, there is no hope.
So, Partha, thank you very much for coming and speaking with us, and we have a lot more to talk about. Hopefully, we'll continue discussions. Thanks everyone for coming, and again, please be sure to sign this on your way out, and also sign up for volunteering on September 17th to 24th, and watch our email messages for future opportunities for action and participation. Thanks again.